Welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks. Today, we're going to be talking about impressions of the 2024 Alzheimer's Disease International Conference that just took place over in Poland. And we have our guest with us today who actually was there and actually presented as well. So I'm excited to hear all of that. But before I introduce you to Mary, I want to do a couple of shout outs. So one, I always like to remind people to please go to alzheimersspeaks.com, check out all of the free resources that we have there. And then also check out dementiamap.com, which is a global resource directory. It's free to use. We don't ask you for any of your personal information, so we're not going to hound you or track you. It is free to sign up for if someone has a service, product, or tool, or there are paid plans. And then I also want to just tell you about Twiddle. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they have developed great sensory aids that are absolutely fantastic, especially if someone is dealing with sundowning and getting anxious and things. And these are portable items you can use anywhere. They also have a product called Adapt-A-Wrap, which is fantastic too, especially if you have someone who likes to disrobe or just is fidgeting with their clothes all the time, or maybe lack of mobility. So you can go to their website, which is the number 4 and then twiddlesplural.com. And if you are interested in a memory cafe that is virtual, I do that on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. I provide just one of many. You can reach out to me at radio@Alzheimer's Speaks for information on that, or go to the Memory Cafe directory, and you'll find over 1,000 memory cafes to pick and choose from. So with no further ado, let's go talk to our guest. Well, hello, Mary. I always love talking with you. Usually, Mary and we co-host Dementia in the Arts, so we get to see each other, once a month at minimum on that. But it's always fun to hear what's going on with you personally and professionally on Alzheimer's Speaks. And you just came back from a big trip not too long ago over in Poland, checking out and also speaking at the Alzheimer's Disease International Conference. So I'm going to have you introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll go down our line of questioning and have a great conversation and do some learning.
Well, thank you so much, Lori, for having me on this topic. I am Mary Crescenzo. I am the author of The Planet Alzheimer's Guide, 8 Ways the Arts Can Transform the Life of Your Loved One and Your Own. I'm the playwright of Planet A about the inner world of dementia. And also I conduct a workshop called Self-Care Through Creative Writing for Caregivers. And I'm on Lori's show with her and Dementia and the Arts.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I always ask people, to explain to our audience if they've been personally touched by dementia, in their own circle, their own family and friends. So can you explain to people if you've been one that's been touched?
Actually, I have not. And yet, when I started working and developing my programs in arts for persons with dementia, that is when I began experiencing my time with persons with dementia. I had previously worked with various older adults. And it's funny that you asked that, because although no one is in my family who has had this disorder, over these years, these hundreds of people I've worked with, I feel and still see them as my family, because when I entered that space with them, it was so personal. So That's how I like to look at it, and it still touches me in my heart.
Well, and I think that's where most people in this space come from. They've actually been personally touched, or the work that they're doing touches them so profoundly that all these people feel like family and friends. You know, they're not just clients. So let's talk about the ADI, which is again Alzheimer's Disease International, but that's how most people know them. Conference. When was it, and what was the theme of it?
Well, it was the end of April for 3 days in Krakow, Poland, and it was the 36th conference. This is a global event that's been going on for quite a long time. There was a wide variety, and by the way, I have notes if you don't mind, because there's so much to share. There was a wide variety of positive, informed presentations, and the common focus was on innovation in care and respect for both carers and those cared for. And some of the themes were expressed through this period of time, like one of the goals was quality of life beyond pharma. Another was the importance of whole family approach. Another was the emphasis on challenging the status quo on dementia. And another one, the fourth one I have here, is the recognition that people living with dementia often have greater capacities than are acknowledged. And that was the theme throughout.
Well, that sounds like a really, really interesting conference. What was your overall impression? What led you up, I guess, to even applying to speak and then, deciding to fly over there? That's a big commitment and expense and the whole nine yards.
Yes, I had heard of this organization and I watched some of their presentations on YouTube. I really felt that their perspective, since it was global, would help me to understand different thought processes on dementia. And it was just exciting for me to travel. We had some friends in another country that we have always wanted to see for a long time. So my husband and I decided to attend. He didn't attend, but I did. And I just was interested in meeting different people and different perspectives on this. And it was a wonderful and very exciting and positive, although sometimes bittersweet experience.
I used to talk a lot with Mark Wortman, who prior was the executive director there, and Mark has since, passed away, and Paula now is the executive director. But I always found it fascinating and exciting, and really exhilarating in terms of how broad this is, how all the different approaches that are being taken, and yet how so many people still don't know all of this stuff exists. And so I'm anxious to hear more about the conference and your perspective of it and how you define the global perspective that you saw at the conference.
Well, yes, the presenters and the delegates are also called attendees. So those who presented, those who attended, some did both, consisted of neuroscientists, doctors, social scientists, arts practitioners, and advocates, as well as a contingent of people, about a dozen, who spoke on stage living with early onset dementia. And many of them spoke about how their countries approach this disorder and how culture plays a role in that. And that was fascinating to me. So I'll tell you a little about some of the countries' perspectives. Also, there was a common belief that through culturally sensitive care, addressing life experiences about people who live in different countries, that really makes a difference in terms of person-based care and culture-based care. So in France, the government has an effort now to raise awareness of AD in the political sector, and they do not encourage the word dementia or demented in the language because of its negative connotations. Instead, they use the term Alzheimer's or related disorders as a phrase. France also encourages people to use the term all friendly rather than dementia friendly. And in France and in the Netherlands, there are model villages created to accommodate the lifestyle of people living with dementia, which was so exciting to me. In Japan, there's a focus on the right of inclusion, the right to work and be paid, and the right to participate in social settings. In Kenya, there is a lot of self-stigma by carers. So therefore, they don't really share with others what they're going through. And in rural areas, many of those carers who have to work, they literally tie the person that they care for with dementia to a tree, rather than leave them at home unattended. And consequently, the person they care for will not get any food, they'll soil themselves during the day. And sometimes people stop by and give them water. And all of this is acceptable under the circumstances in these rural areas. The positive side of that is there's a program called the Stride Project, and it's trying to combat this with efforts to break stigma and to create options for care. In Hong Kong, many home care workers slash domestics find themselves doing too much for the person they care for, and therefore limiting and ignoring the person's abilities. And here's the rationale behind that. These workers are afraid that the families will feel they're not doing all they can for the family members, and therefore they're afraid they're going to lose their job. So that was, for me, many surprising, interesting, and challenging things to hear.
You know, in Kenya, I've had a couple of people from that area in Africa on the show, and they talk about how people perceive people living with dementia as witches.
Yes.
And just total outcasts, and it affects the whole family. You know, everyone detaches from them, and it can get primitive, like you said, in terms of locking somebody up in that heat with no food, no water, no nothing. It's just it just saddened me to hear that, and it was hard to believe in this day and age anywhere that could still be happening. When you talked about Hong Kong, how perceptive of those care workers to understand that they are overdoing and they are taking away purpose, and in that sense of community and that sense of belonging from people, but they're scared to death they're going to lose a job because society isn't educated enough to understand the importance of inclusion and giving people purpose and, you know, guiding them and supporting them versus doing everything for them. And yet, I think if we educate people on that, we all want our independence. We don't want that taken away. And yet this is so overlooked. And even here in the US, you know, everyone talks about person-centered care. But person-centered care a lot of times walks right over the person and takes things away because we're like putting them in our time slot and our routines, and this is the way it has to be done. And it's gotten better over the years, but I still think we have a long ways to go. You had mentioned, well, I think was it France, where they don't want to use the word dementia or demented. And I struggle with that because I understand where they're coming from. But I personally, and again, this is just me, guys, but I personally get frustrated with let's keep changing the word instead of educating the people of the realities and what is possible. Because I think no matter what word you have, they're going to come up with another one. Somebody else isn't going to like it again. But again, you know, some cool things that they're doing there. And then, you know, just the overall impression of our culture matters. I've always been really frustrated, even with the testing that we do. Everything is kind of adjusted to, you know, the average, you know, white American here, and people are like, hello, these phrases don't make sense. This isn't what we call things. This isn't how we do things. This isn't what we value. And I'll never forget hearing, I don't know if you remember Pat Summitt, the great basketball coach down in Tennessee.
Yes.
They have the Summit Foundation, Pat Summitt Foundation. And her son spoke publicly, and it just like went right to my heart, going, yes, you're right. And he said, well, no wonder my mom didn't pass that test. So much of it was math. She hated math all of her life. She was horrible at math. So I would never expect her to be good at it now,
Mhm.
because that wasn't her forte. But, we get so structured in trying to assess and pinpoint, and we forget about the human beings that we are, and how fluid we are, and our likes and our dislikes make a difference.
Absolutely.
For me, I think
Absolutely.
I had a speaker friend who was in her 80s, and she spoke for years, and you could ask her anywhere that she spoke, and she could tell you the flight she took, the hotel she went on. She could tell you the carpet, the drapes. And I'm like, I don't know. I'll be like, if I remember the state, I remember the people. I don't remember any of that stuff because it's not important to me. And don't ever ask me to be on your trivia team unless you want to lose. I mean, that's just me and how I function. So, all of these things that you highlighted are really pretty profound.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it's something that we really need to keep elevating this conversation.
And also, if I might just add to that, reflect on one of the things you said. As a former teacher, I know that we all have strengths, weaknesses, we all have different styles of learning, and that applies to people with dementia and other special needs. And if we just could understand that, then there would be a lot more connection and communication and joy and quality of life.
Yep.
So
I would say it goes past understanding, it's accepting that fact.
accepting,
we
yes.
we all know that. We all know that from a logical standpoint. We've all read it, we've been told that. Kids in school struggle. I remember when my daughter was having problems, they're like, have her use different colored pencils, so that she can map things
Mm.
out. I remember Michael Ellenbogen asked me one time Michael lives with dementia. He said, can you review this speech? And he sent it over to me. And I was like, I couldn't read this if my life depended on it. And I mean, he had regular type, bolded type, different colored words. I mean, it was just like my brain could not do that. But he's like, this teaches me where to pause, where to emphasize. I mean, and Michael would get behind that podium and he would just flow.
Mhm.
Just, but if I had to read that off of his notes, not gonna happen, so those things are really, really important. Even for Alzheimer's Speaks, one of the reasons I stepped in, Mary, was just for that reason. I thought, why aren't we using all these different types of media to reach people? And now I kind of say, okay, let's slow down. There's too many types of platforms and it's hard to know how to reach people. It's kind of gotten crazy, but that's the world we live in. But we have to accept that's the world we live in. What about some of the presentations? I would imagine, there must have been a lot to choose from. And how the heck do you even pick through all of them? Because there had to be just a zillion of them.
Yeah, there was the main stage, the main huge room. I think it fit 1,000 people and it was almost full. Then there were other rooms where you could attend. There were times then the only presentation was the one in the large room. And then, excuse me, and then you could make other choices. And also you could see these things virtually online. There was a period of time that you could view these, to try to view as many as you could, but you couldn't view all of them. And the presentations themselves, there were 3 avenues for presentations, and they were all available, as I said, virtually. There was first live on stage,
Mm-hmm.
in various rooms as well. Then there were through video pre-recorded stage presentations. And then the third was large posters in presentation hung in a specific large hall. Now, although my presentation was on video, I was invited to attend the conference as well. And I was thrilled to attend. And I actually spoke on how theater as art and public forum can foster dementia awareness. So the attendees had the opportunity to experience all three of these forms and even ask questions to the presenters. Even after the conference was done, there was a site on the website where you could still communicate. So there were many different presentations and topics, but I'd just like to mention two. People with dementia spoke on their experiences and their opinions on how they would like to and how they are influencing policy on care and treatment. And also there was a non-binary group who addressed how they are underrepresented in regard to lack of services and the prejudices that they faced. So we had science, art, social sciences, all very interesting and much to learn from.
Did you find, because this is something I find, if someone's gone to a conference or any kind of gathering where people with dementia are speaking, there are so many people in the audience that are shocked of how well they can communicate and how succinct they are. And, you know, and I find it more with the professionals as a whole, and maybe not on an international conference, maybe that's not the case, but, you know, I go to, you know, a lot of regional state and people are shocked. And that's one thing I always push for is don't just listen to me, you know, hear from the person living with it 24/7, because their perspective we have to hear, because they know the true details of what the needs are. And we can never support them if we don't know that. You know, if we're just guessing.
Exactly. And I for a minute, I have to catch myself. I have to ask myself that this is a prejudice in itself. Like I've met several people there that I was not aware that they had dementia. They were so articulate, etc. And I'm thinking when I find out, like, wow, look how articulate they are. And I'm, wait a minute. We tend to do that for people with special needs, like, oh, they're a hero, they're so amazing. Well, they are amazing, and it really has nothing to do with the fact that the dementia makes them magical or, you know, or special. This is who they are. And so I agree with you. I didn't see or hear a lot of that, but as I said, I myself was kind of taken aback, and I thought, why? You know, think about your reaction. So yeah, it does happen though.
Well, and it is funny. I've had those times. In fact, I had it with one on our Dementia in the Arts, where my inner voice screamed out something that I thought, how can I have that strong of stigma come out? I worked in the disabilities, you know, the developmental disabilities for almost 10 years. I've worked in the senior market the rest of my life. And since 2009, I've been in this space, but, you know, I dealt with my mom for 30 years with hers. And I thought, how is that possible? But it really made me realize how deep those things are ingrained in us.
Yes.
And how long it takes. But it was also a really good lesson for me, because I learned so much from that person and their art. And it's probably the most profound piece that I tell everybody about. And I share my stigma story, and I like literally almost wanted to like slap myself on video, because I was so ashamed of myself of I know better. I know better.
The fact that when you said the word shame, we all have these moments, and we shouldn't, or not a matter of shouldn't, but to feel shame and to feel embarrassed, and these feelings are feelings. But I like to see that when it happens to me as you say, as a lesson, as a way to understand and to accept and to learn something for myself, which is an enlightenment. So yeah.
Which is really true. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts being in this dementia atmosphere has given me, is I really question just about everything and ask, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? You know, and that one was just a very black and white, but I have many lessons my mom taught me. And that's why I do what I do, because there's so much to learn from this population.
So much.
They're just amazing and so giving, and typically have a pretty good sense of humor about it all too. You know?
Yeah, there is so much to learn, and I've learned that over the years. Just always trying to be open and humble to that.
Yeah, because none of us are perfect, and
right.
And I think that's one of the stigmas too we have to get over is we raise the bar and our expectations are even higher than what they were before dementia hit our world. And that makes it an impossible game to even try to win or even play someday. What other, programs did you listen to? You said you heard from people living with dementia. Was there anything specific that really stood out from them that resonated with you?
Yes, there were so many, and I think I'd like to tell you some of the things that surprised me, and I think that kind of answers your question. One of the things that surprised me was that there were and are minor children who are carers. I didn't know that, and they were on video in their presentations speaking, and their organizations that serve them spoke about the unique stressors that they have and dealing with school and the role they play as caregiver. At the same time, they were hiding their circumstances from their peers, not knowing the reaction. They didn't know where to go for support. This was, for me, it just shocked me. It hit me. Just imagining what a young person, teenager, even younger, has to, in their mind, hide and feel so alone. And all they have to do in the routine care of that person living at home, who may not be getting care either. That was very touching to me and really made me sit up and realize I'm learning something. One more thing there that I didn't really know.
I'm going to jump in on that. I'm just curious if like Lorenzos House or Hilarity for Charity or Kid Caregivers were there because they all target that.
Yes. Hilarity for Charity was not there. I was a little surprised. Lorenzos House was there. I met the founder, and I mentioned you also and said hi because I know you've had them on your show. And they also spoke on this. And they have so many innovative ways to deal with children. They have centers where they can go. And so, yes, they were there. And what was the third organization you mentioned?
Kid Caregivers with Haley Richmond, who she has 2 nonprofits now, and I think she's still in high school. She might, maybe she's going into college this year, but I'm thinking she's still in high school. And she started out actually with Max. I want to say it was Wallach, and Max. He's kind of a genius, so he was ahead of schedule and in college before his time. But he started puzzles. What is it called? Puzzles Together. And he would collect puzzles and brand new ones from companies, and then he would give them out to families and communities. Mm-hmm. And he got busy because he's going to be a neurologist. So then Haley took that over, and they wrote the book together. I think it's called Why's Grandma's Underwear in the Refrigerator?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I've heard of that. So there was a young woman who was 14 who actually won recently, or the year that I won the award, the Maud's Award.
Yep, that's it.
Yep. Okay. She had a grandmother who she went to speak with, and she didn't really know what to do. What an amazing young woman.
Oh, so, she's incredible. Yeah.
She was great. And she was not there, though. She was great when I remember hearing her speak 2 years ago. But so yes, Lorenzos House has amazing programs and very powerful mission there. And so that was one of the things that I thought about. If I also want to say something else, I was surprised that although I knew this in advance, the conference was attended by the Queen Sofia of Spain and Royal Highness Princess Muna Al Hussein from Jordan. And they were also participants in a panel, and they're absolutely fierce advocates. But their arrival and their entourage in the hall was just as impressive as what they had to say. It was, I've never seen anything like this, but that was interesting. And the fact that there are leaders from countries at this conference is very important to validate our concerns. And there was also a minister from Poland who spoke.
Wow, that's really interesting. I do want to give one more plug for Lorenzos. House because they do a lot of online stuff. In fact, in June, they just had one of their summits for
Yes,
families, which is a really big deal. And but people, I believe around the world can all participate in that, and so should check that out. But they've grown significantly, which is really cool to see. And it's nice when you mention the royalty because I've heard that before that they're there, and even like with Norms McNamara, he's been invited to things in London. I think he was invited even to the Queen's birthday, but he was not, he was under the weather and he couldn't go. But their government has funding for this, and even
yes,
it's Purple Angel, it's on trash trucks and buses, and I mean their awareness level is way different than what we have here in the US.
that's very true. And I must say that when I looked at the big picture, I thought is so much more progressive ideas and acceptance happening in many of the countries that I had witnessed than here, although we do have a lot of programs. But this idea of equality and understanding and acceptance, as you say, it's all about education. And the fact that France has brought this into the political spectrum to talk about this is very important, because when our leaders speak, we listen.
Mhm.
We may not agree or disagree, but we do. And back to, if I may, the royalty that came. So if you're listening and you're imagining these people coming in all their regalia, no, they were just wearing lovely, simple suits, and not just, they just walked in. And again, there were people around them, but to hear them speak, and the fact that they physically came in person was very important to me, I think, and impressive that they took that time to do that, like everyone else who was there.
Were they touched personally, did they say, by dementia?
I can't say for sure. I don't want to guess, but I can't say for sure if they personally may even have, I don't know, have this, or that they were touched by this. They really didn't speak about their personal connection, if anything. They were just speaking about the advocacy and what they're doing in their countries and how important this is. So, yeah, but that's a good question. And that might be a good question to find the answer to.
Well, and the reason I ask is it seems like so often someone has to be touched with it to get it and to
Mhm.
really step up and step into it. Like even here in the US, like the Best Buy CEO's dad has it. And so she's stepping into this space, with healthcare and home health and technology, and she, kind of flies low on the radar and stuff, but she could see that. And she's a sandwich generation, person as
Yeah.
well with it all. So it's very interesting. But that personal experience, it changes everything, because you can hear the words, you can hear the frustrations, you can hear the needs, but until it hits you and you're that person spinning in darkness, not knowing what to
Mhm.
do or where to go.
It's not in the abstract anymore.
No,
It's
no.
in the personal connection, heart and head
Yep.
together.
Well, and even people in this space, say when it hits their family, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this all wrong. I've been telling people for years and years and years what I was taught and I thought was right, but it really isn't practical, or it really doesn't work, or there's so many other things that people could try, knowing that every family is a little bit different. So, all of that storytelling to me, I think, is really, powerful stuff.
Yes. And every person with dementia is different.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you talked about the people with dementia, and you talked about, the kids caring. What other topics that you went and saw for presentations stuck out?
There were scientific programs about the use of drugs. I'm going to mention some of the things that I learned, and I think that will, in a way, share with you what I've what I heard, the presentations that I heard that'll kind of explain that to you. I learned that Alzheimer's dementia is not necessarily an old person's disease, and yet 2 out of 3 people think dementia is caused by old age. As I said, I met vibrant, active persons who were diagnosed with this. Also, I learned that persons with AD are influencing policies, as I mentioned before, and taking action to decide what's best for them. There was a gentleman who is an artist activist who had a presentation, and he has Lewy body dementia, who runs a theater group in Wales and has a radio show as well. And he also said, just get rid of the term dementia friendly, because dementia is not friendly to anyone. And he talked about his theater group and how profound it was to have people up on stage writing plays, speaking with dementia. Also, I learned that memory loss is not always a primary symptom of dementia. And there was a gentleman who spoke about his circumstance. And I think he also had Lewy body dementia. And he was saying that people have told me I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk. This is what's going to happen to me. This has not happened to me. He also talked about how his memory is fine, but it would take him hours to sort a pile of papers. And so everyone is affected in a different way. Also, the doctors talked about, they acknowledged that they're often making misdiagnoses, and therefore medications that are prescribed can be often detrimental to the person's well-being. So they're kind of backing off to a degree in that, and they're using the term mixed diagnosis, which is using that is a different way to try to pinpoint something that they themselves not 100% sure of what type it is.
You know, the other thing with that, Mary,
Yes.
which I think is really smart to do the mixed diagnosis, is it's an opportunity to let the families know that the diagnosis could change. Because
Yes.
most people got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and some of them have switched 3 to 6, maybe even more times. And then they just get disgusted with their doctors. Like, why don't you know what this is?
Right.
And it's because we don't really know what any of these are to a great degree. I mean, it's
Yes.
a baby disease that's been around for 100 years, but we've really only been focusing on it, the last, I would say, 20, 30 years. And that was at a low level in the beginning. We're getting a lot more money. But then all of these theories are exploding in terms of the cause. And that's fairly new, because it's still kind of the amyloid plaque thing that is the primary out there. And yet people are jumping up and down screaming, going, that was disproved with the Nuns theory. Why is this the primary? And why aren't these other modes, being announced more? So the general public, I think, is learning more. We're creating a more comfortable environment for people, though we have a long ways to go. It definitely is changing. But I like that, the mixed diagnosis, because it does prepare them. And what I've heard from families over and over is how jarring that is to be told, no, we've been wrong all these years, because
Trust goes out the window. Like you said, you're just giving up. So they were very humble in that, in making those statements about the different choices of how to talk about it. And I was impressed with that. I also learned that there are more and more people with dementia choosing, of course, to live their lives the way they feel is best for them. And many doctors think that dementia, many, not doctors that were there, but in general, doctors, many think that dementia is a normal part of aging, and it's not. So the last thing I would like to say in regard to my impressions is that in regard to the arts, that is where my specialty lies, it was really emphasized and expressed that there's a growing acknowledgement that the arts and arts engagement can enrich quality of life as an alternative to medication. For example, our brain waves are synchronized with music and dance. And there's a growing understanding how all the arts are creating neural pathways, new neural pathways, literally, actually in the brain. And therefore the arts are a viable complement and alternative to care and self-care. And so for me to hear that, I'm thinking I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone in that point of view, but to see people and hear people from all parts of the world not just talk about it, but illustrate it through pictures and their own experience was really a positive thought for me. And the whole conference was quite emotional. I mean, there were tears, there were laughter. They had us get up and dance with it was a Polynesian group. The overall feeling was joy and positivity with everything that we know about the darkness of this disease. So I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to attend.
Well, that's really neat. Well, and it's nice to hear that it was all about hope. It was sharing all these alternatives that are available to people. And instead of walking out with a heaviness, people are walking out lifted.
Yes.
And wanting to spread this message. I know when we talked after you got back, you're like, can I get on the show? I want to talk about this. This is so important. I learned so much. And it's like, that's like way cool. That's great energy. And that's a huge, huge compliment, to Alzheimer's Disease International and what they've pulled together and what they're doing. I just think it's neat. You had talked earlier about the differences in some of the countries. And when I first started, Mary, like I mentioned, I talked with Mark Wortman a lot, and he was so encouraging and so graceful. And I'll never forget calling him one day and going, I think I have to move. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, I think I have to move to where you guys are, right? Because they're not getting it here, and he just burst out laughing. And I'm like, Mark, I am serious. I am so frustrated. I'm working so hard. I'm barking up trees. I'm knocking on doors. I don't get why people aren't embracing this. I don't get how they're not seeing this. And he continued to laugh. And then he says, you really don't get why, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't understand why. Why is it so easy for you guys over there? And he said, first of all, it's not that easy over here, but we have a mentality of, doing things for the social good. And he said, and your country was developed because people did not want to go that path. So America was created for people to have their own thing. And so in doing that, we got very siloed. We got very proprietary. Like over there, they share the dementia-friendly concept. They share the memory cafes. They share so many things. And over here, it's like, well, how much do you want to pay? We can draft a contract for that. I mean, it's a whole different mentality. And again, we're breaking through. And I think the people really at the heart of the movement of change do not have that mindset. They really are freely giving, and not that they don't charge because they got to make a living. But I did not see that difference at all. I mean, because it was something I guess I was never really educated on. I mean, you knew the history of we came over on boat and all of that stuff, but I didn't really know how that played out on a societal level.
Yeah, the individualism, which is important for personal freedom, but also what about the common good, the freedom for all, and one not to infringe one's freedom on another. Hopefully we can learn from what's going on over there, and hopefully with some changes that will happen. I do want to say that, because we're in it all together, right?
Yeah.
I want to tell you also about how accessible everybody was. There were doctors, neuroscientists of the highest order in the world, some from this country and some from others. But there was lunch and everybody sat together. They weren't by themselves. You could sit with anybody. Everybody was open to questions and comments. And it was really a community. And I remember that it hit me as soon as I got there, because I walked in and I definitely needed coffee. It was like jet lag, from traveling over. And so there was a gentleman there who had a cup of coffee in his hand, and the only person I saw with coffee. And I said, "Excuse me, where did you get the coffee?" And he goes, "Oh, over here, let me show you." And he walks me over to where it is. He said, "I get it, I understand." Like within an hour later, he's up on the stage and his accolades were, a mile long. And I was like, wow, this guy was kind enough to direct me. And the other thing, our lanyards were kind of low. And so that was one of my suggestions when we filled out, reports, or not reports, or comments, like make them higher, because you had to be looking down like this at everyone, which is kind of rude to read them. So I didn't even glance at what he was wearing. And also there were, so that was accessibility. Also, they wanted to hear opinions. They had invited a group of us to have breakfast with a small group, to have breakfast one morning and discuss, like, what was the day before it ended, like, how are things going? What are your suggestions? What doesn't work, you think? What is working for the group? And that was also, I thought, so inclusive. We had that opportunity to share. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. I won't forget it. And what they do, I realize now, it's my first conference. They don't tell you where it's going to be 2 years from now, because it's every 2 years. And at the end, they're very creative people also. They started having this woman sing La Vie en Rose, and we didn't know why, but everybody's surmising, as people had been at the conference. And so they finally announced in 2 years it's going to be in Paris. So, but it was a wonderful experience. And I so appreciate you allowing me to share with your listeners what my impressions were, what I learned, and hopefully just to share that experience with those who weren't at the conference or might have been interested about what it was like.
Well, I'm thrilled that you were excited enough, and saw the importance in this, of sharing. I do have a question, because you had mentioned, there was the big room with the on stage, and then they had the breakout rooms, and then you said posters. And a lot of people might not know what posters are, what that really is.
Thank you. I'll explain that. So there was a whole section where the posters, by the way, must have been 4 feet by 3 feet. And the persons who wanted to present their posters came from different places. And the posters explained visually and also with words, but mostly visually, as to what their work was, what they did, how they deal with dementia, whether it was a doctor or a care home. And you could walk down the hall, and during certain periods at lunch, because we had a long lunch period, those people who made the posters would stand by them and you could talk with them about it. And I've got to tell you a crazy story. I'm walking down the hall looking at the posters, and I see one that says Kaiser Permanente, okay? And I go to Kaiser right here in California, and I'm like, Kaiser?
And that's a healthcare.
Yes, Kaiser is a healthcare, I don't know what you call it.
Organization.
Yeah. And so I'm like, what? And so I walk over, and this woman is there, and I said, Kaiser? And she said, yes, I'm in the United States in Woodland Hills, California. And I said, I live just 5 minutes out of Woodland Hills. How could this be? She says, I live in Calabasas. We started talking. I'm like, how would this ever happen, right? And so that's led me to talk with her further. And we had a meeting last week with her department, geriatric department, and we're probably going to do some collaboration, because she basically said, what we deal with is medication, and we need more. We know these people need more. So at that odd little meeting way over in Krakow, Poland, which, by the way, is a beautiful city, there I met this woman who is my neighbor.
Isn't that funny how that works, though?
Absolutely.
Just amazing. And then the other thing for people who might be thinking of getting involved in the future, let's say someone can't afford to go, were there people on the videos that didn't actually come and attend? Or was that a mandate? If you present, you need to participate in the conference?
Oh, no, not at all. First of all, you had to submit abstracts, and that was a summary of what you wanted to say. They had to accept you.
Mhm.
And then you could choose to do it virtually on video, or you could choose to attend in person, or have your videos be part of the stage presentation. And so there was also certain ways and means where if you can't afford it, that they will work with you. It depends on certain criteria. But yes, there was that kind of accessibility too, which was nice. So you didn't have to be there. But yeah, I just wanted to be there.
And I'm curious, and you may not know this answer, but for the people that were on stage living with dementia, do you know if their expenses were covered? Because so often people living with dementia get asked to speak, and people don't understand what a burden that can be for them, income wise, and yet they can't really. Some of them can't get speaking fees and things like that because they might lose some funding that they have to survive on a regular basis and stuff. And I don't know if you know that or saw anything about that, but just curious.
Yeah, in the application, if I recall correctly, if you had Alzheimer's or dementia, I don't believe you had to pay.
Okay.
And as if you had a family member and you were a carer and you had to leave your person you care for back where in your country, then there was a discount. So, and again, there's criteria around all this, but in general, I know that to answer your question, they did make accommodations for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and also for people who had to leave someone behind while they were doing this. So there were different tiers, different options, which also I felt was really helpful, I'm sure.
Well, and how nice to me that says they understand their audience and what the needs are, which to me is absolutely critical. And so that's wonderful to
Also travel wise, there was also like a stipend that again, with an application, you might have some funding to help pay for your travel. So that was good. Didn't want to forget that.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Anything that we haven't covered that's bubbling to the top?
I thought of you when I was there. I thought of all the work that you do. And I just was very humbled by all of this, and feel that everything I learned will help me to move forward with the work that I do as an advocate, as a speaker. And it was wonderful to be in this group of people. And I wish that you were there.
Yeah. One of these days, I would love to go. And this is gonna ping me to reach out to Paula, the executive director, and have a chat with her again. And because I haven't talked with her for quite a while, and so that would be good to reconnect for sure.
And please tell her how much I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, I will.
I mean, yeah, I think all the feedback that they can get is helpful. And they, as I said, they were open to like things that we thought needed to be improved. But overall, it was a profound and amazing experience. I would love to go back again. I just encourage people to check their videos on YouTube, and just know that you're not alone. You're not alone.
Well, and their annual report is so eye-opening too, that they do every year, and there's just a lot that they have to offer. So, check them out. I know a lot of times people are looking at where do we donate to. People don't know where to donate, and this is a organization that is worldwide. Even though we have our Alzheimer's Association local chapters and stuff here, that I believe is part of them as well, but there are a lot of small countries that need assistance as well.
By the way, that you mentioned that there was never any banners, promotions, talk about the fact that they are connected in some way with the Alzheimer's Association. The president of the Alzheimer's Association did speak, but it was not, that was not the focus of this and the angle of this. This was a very free and open, from what I could tell, opinionated group of knowledgeable people with their own perspectives. This was not any kind of sales pitch for anything. Most important about just sharing the innovations and what we can continue to do.
And I could be wrong, but I thought the Alzheimer's Association was part of them, but they are very much their own entity here.
Yeah.
Just the Alzheimer's Association is, and the Alzheimer's Foundations and all of those types.
And there were people from, I think there is some kind of umbrella form of connection, but nothing that was really out there. And also the Alzheimer's Society from Europe, from I guess England, that group was there. There were other large associations and organizations that were represented.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us. This was wonderful information. In wrapping up, I just always like to ask our listeners to like, click, and share the episode, not because we're chasing the numbers. That has nothing to do with anything. Alzheimer's Speaks is all about being a giver of hope. And this is one of the simplest ways you can give hope to others, is by sharing the knowledge that you've learned. And, it takes no time, costs you no money, but it really has a big impact. And you don't know who in your sphere of influence, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, all of those things. Some people have email addresses for their work, for their friends. It's really important, because this disease knows no boundaries. And anybody is vulnerable to it. And the more we're educated ahead of time, before we get hit with it, the better off we are, and the better able we are to support others that are dealing with it as well. So again, Mary, thank you so much for your time. Your enthusiasm just kind of took over. So we know that you're passionate about this. And I personally feel that this would be very much a worthwhile thing to go to. I think that was very evident that you're not going to be disappointed.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for allowing me the time. And I will see you and your listeners on Dementia and the Arts.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All
Mary.
right. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, in wrapping up, again, I just want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We will also encourage you to, again, check out all of our free educational resources at alzheimersspeaks.com, or go to dementiamap.com to find global resources as well. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.